Hello, everyone, and welcome to Justaposition, the podcast where we explore mental health, vulnerability, and personal life journeys. So make sure you subscribe to the YouTube channel if you haven't already, and stream new episodes out every Thursday wherever you listen to your podcasts. I'm really looking forward to this episode because I'm going to deep dive talk about my experience dropping out of college. I figured I'd do kind of like a deep dive story time on this part of my life because I think it's a really interesting time, and because I've seen a lot of conversation over the past year, maybe 2 years happening on TikTok and other platforms as well. But, mostly TikTok. I think that's where the most like radical and progressive kind of viewpoints about the world come from. I've seen a lot of people talking about dropping out of college, not needing a traditional education, what their experiences have been. And I've even seen a lot of conversations around, this kind of stereotypical trope of influencers dropping out of college, which I think is really interesting. And I wanted to share my own personal experience, my own journey with dropping out of college, because it was something that I did. How long has it been? 6 years ago? Oh my gosh, it's been a long time. Yeah, I think it was like 6 years ago that I decided on my own to drop out of college. And so I figured I'd kind of share that experience. And then I also want to talk about what my opinions are on really the traditional education system, if it's really needed, if I think it's a good idea that people are dropping out of college, if it's a good idea that influencers are dropping out of college. I want to really deep dive into that because I feel like this is kind of what at least used to be considered kind of a social taboo, where it's like, oh, you dropped out. Oh my goodness, what happened? You poor thing. I feel like it's really changed and progressed a lot, but there's still that kind of social taboo nature around it. And in some family structures or in communities, dropping out can be kind of seen as a sign of failure. So I first want to share my experience and just get into it because I feel like it's a really interesting story and I hope you guys enjoy. So for a backstory, to give you guys kind of reference as to what my upbringing looked like, I grew up on a cattle ranch in the middle of Arizona. And when I say like the middle of nowhere, I mean bumfuck the middle of nowhere. Like our closest neighbors were like a 20-minute walk away. I think they're like 40 acres away. There was no one around, nothing around. It was like literally in the middle of nowhere, tiny little town. So I grew up with, a dad who worked as a rancher, worked with cattle, horses, would, spend his day out on the horses. It was, a very unique experience. And if you guys want kind of like a deep dive episode on what life was like growing up, because it's funny, I find it kind of boring to be honest, but people think it's like really interesting when I brought it up in conversation with, they're like, what? Your dad was a cowboy? You grew up on a ranch? That's so cool. And I'm like, yeah, not really. But if you guys want an episode about that, let me know. But growing up, I think my parents did a good job of kind of raising us in an environment where we had all of our needs accommodated. Like we never struggled for food. We never, struggled for shelter. I was always well taken care of in the sense of like my physical external circumstances, I guess. I don't know how to describe it basically. I was fed and I, never had to worry about being homeless growing up. That being said, I truly had no idea how poor my family was until I moved to Hawaii and I, started my new life after my home life. And I realized like, oh my God, we were dirt fucking poor. Like, and when I tell my friends about like all the little things that we would do in order to save money as a family, they look at me like I'm crazy. They're just like, what? You were so poor. Oh my God. And I'm like, I had no idea. But yeah, like we just had barely any money growing up. There was really no concept of, spending money on high quality items or really treating ourselves or anything like that. I mean, we just lived on the bare bones in terms of our lifestyle, which I think instilled a lot of good lessons into me. I think it also instilled kind of not the best lessons as well. But you know what? You grow up in the environment that you are put in, and that was the environment I was in. So growing up with a very poor family, I mean, traditional education was always very much stressed to us. It was something that was seen as very important, like you should go to college. My dad had gone to college and my mom had partially gone to college. I don't believe that she had graduated, but both of my parents, had experienced traditional education. And it was something that was stressed as like, not necessarily the most important thing in the world, but it was very much like, if you want to be successful in the future, if you want to make any kind of money, you have to go to college. So that was always stressed to me. And growing up, I was always that kid that was like, I'm going to get multiple PhDs. I want to spend all my life in college. I always want to be in college classes and learning. And I was just so fascinated with the concept of learning. And college seemed like such a cool place, mostly because I really just wanted to get out of my toxic home environment. I think that's why I idolized college so much. But truly, I always considered myself to be like someone who was passionate about education. And I figured that I would forever be taking college classes and just collecting degrees like they were fucking Pokemon Go characters. That was really what I thought what my future was going to be. And I will admit the way I got to college was very unconventional, I'd say. I kind of last minute did not originally plan on going to college. I was going to be an English teacher in the Middle East, in Jordan. That was my original plan and something I was really excited about because I've always loved international travel and I really wanted to have an immersive experience in another country where I was able to not only really deep dive into another language and another culture, but experience a different part of the world. So that was my original plan. And then unfortunately it's a crazy story, but summed up, the town that I was originally going to be in for English teaching ended up getting air raided shortly before I was going to go there. And it was a zone that was marked as very risky to go to. It was all over the news, international news. One person that my family had personally known that was working as a volunteer in the same area that I was going to was kidnapped and killed by ISIS. It was a huge, awful situation. And very quickly I had to realize, oh shit, I'm probably not going to be an English teacher in the Middle East. That's probably not the best thing for me to do right now. I guess college would be the next best thing. But consider this, it was like March of that year. College applications typically start like in the fall and close up by the end of the year or at the very beginning of the year. So no one was accepting new applications. And so I really didn't have many options. And one of the only options was to a school that was in Hawaii. But this school had an extremely hard acceptance rate. I think at the time it was like a 4.5% acceptance rate. And I was like a good student, but I wasn't an amazing student. And even talking to my school counselor, he was like, don't even bother trying to apply there because I have so many students who come through my office who say they want to go to this school and they all get denied. They all get rejected. There's just no way you're going to make it in. You shouldn't even try. And I took that as a challenge and I did the entire submission process in 3 days. It was chaotic. It was absolutely insane because for this submission process, you had to do a bunch of interviews with, kind of like high ranking officials within the religion that I was a part of at that time. And a bunch of essays, and it was just crazy. But miraculously, I got accepted to this school. And within a period of 3 months, I went from thinking that I was going to be in the Middle East teaching English to boom, going to college in Hawaii. And I moved to Hawaii, and initially it was kind of a chaotic experience, but I was, very excited to be in college. My entire approach was just like, okay, I am here to learn. I'm so excited to just study what I'm passionate about. I'm excited to be in a place around other people who are similarly really passionate about education. This is, dream come true. There are so many things that I'm so grateful for when it comes to my college experience overall. And I would say definitely overall, I'm very thankful for it. But there was kind of a lot of factors that went into play as to why my overall educational experience was not meant to be finished and why I was not meant to get a degree. And, when I ended up dropping out, it was a decision I made literally in less than 24 hours. I went from just thinking I was going to go to classes on a Monday to boom, the next day, dropping out and moving out of the college town that I was in. So it was chaotic. What led to this big decision? There was a lot of factors. I'd say one of the main ones is that I did go to a religious school. Now, I did not want to originally go to this school because of the religion that it was affiliated with, but at the time with this school, if you got good grades, you got free tuition, and it was one of the most affordable schools I could find at the time. And I was completely on my own when it came to my college education. My parents were not supporting me throughout my college education because they had essentially cut me off when they learned that I wasn't interested in going on an LDS mission. If you know, you know. But I wasn't financially supported by my parents, so I was completely solely financially supporting myself. And with this school, religion was very heavily integrated into the coursework, and it was required that you went to church on Sundays. It was required that you were involved in a bunch of various religious activities. And because I was not only gay in a religious school that did not support gay students whatsoever at the time, it was also just kind of infuriating to me to hear doctrine being spoken about that directly contradict not only with my worldview, but with my identity. And it was really difficult because the school I went to had a very strict code around behaviors that, in my opinion, really suppresses students, only encouraged dishonesty, and led to this constant feeling like you didn't belong there. So it was not the most pleasant experience in that sense. And that's just my personal experience, but that put a lot of pressure on me to not really have the best time there. I think similarly, I learned that I am not the type of person who really thrives in a traditional education environment. And I had to learn within myself that there is a huge difference between loving education and loving traditional education. I am someone who loves learning. I constantly want to be growing and educating myself and reading and learning about new things that I'm really interested in. But I do not do well in an environment being paid, like me paying to be forced to learn about things that I don't give a fuck about. That drives me crazy. And that's one of the things I cannot stand about college is these GE classes, these required classes, because I went into college knowing exactly what I wanted to do. I wanted to work within the nonprofit space. I wanted to work within media. I found it very fascinating. And it just seemed ridiculous that I was being forced to take these classes that I had absolutely no interest in, and that my money and my time was going towards learning about things that were not going to contribute to the future or career path that I wanted. And also, going to school, I kind of expected, and this might be because I came from a town where there weren't many people who went to college, because the majority of people who lived where I lived ended up staying on their, working on cattle ranches and not pursuing a further education. I think in a sense, traditional college education was kind of idolized, where all the people that you're around are just so passionate about learning and education and want to change the world and want to make a difference. And going to college, I very quickly realized that that is not at all the type of environment that is present. And for a lot of the students and people there, they're just kind of checking off the boxes of what they need to do in order to get a job that will pay for whatever comfortable lifestyle they want. There wasn't a huge amount of students I felt that were truly passionate about what they were studying. It seemed like everyone was just kind of there to just, do what they needed to do and move on with life. And that's to no fault of theirs. Absolutely not. I think it was just an adjustment that I needed to see and needed to have within myself, where I realized, oh, okay, this is not the environment that I was necessarily expecting. And I'm not necessarily surrounded by people who are maybe as passionate about education as much as, I am. And I don't mean that in a superior way at all, because everyone has their own individual passions. And like I said before, traditional education, I don't think is for everyone, but it definitely was kind of like a, paradigm shift of sorts to kind of realize that. But I'd say the main thing that really contributed to my decision to drop out was me being able to afford it. I, am so grateful to have gone to a school that was relatively affordable and that I only had a limited debt from afterwards. I still had a good amount of debt, but it wasn't in the 6-digit ranges, And even with the loans I was able to get, and me supporting myself by working not one, not two, but 3 jobs in addition to my, student life, I could not afford to continue going to school after a certain point. Like, I really struggled at the end of my time at school. And I think I completed 3 semesters. I think it was on my 4th semester that I ended up dropping out. And, originally when I first went to school, money was obviously tight. I'm a college student. It's not like I'm going to be rolling in dough and I'm supporting myself. So money was tight, but I still felt a little bit, somewhat comfortable. But as I started to chop away at the student loans, and as I started to realize that I would need more money in order to support me being able to continue going to school, I started to feel the pressure a lot. And my last semester at the university was rough. And let me paint a picture of what it was like, because I feel like I have seen so many students and so many people in college who are like, oh my God, I'm like so broke. I can't afford anything right now. And then they'll go to the movies and they'll like go out to eat with their friends for dinner, and they'll be like buying new clothes and things like that, which, if you can do that, work, like good for you. But that is not the type of broke I was. Oh, no. I was truly broke. So I only had 20 cents a day for food. I remember at the end of that last semester, I first budgeted 25 cents a day for food, but then I had to drop it down to 20 cents and then had to go lower than that because I didn't have any money beyond what I was paying for my college tuition and rent for. And mind you, it is Hawaii, so it's a lot more expensive than other locations. It's just kind of the nature of being in Hawaii. And why a lot of people inevitably end up leaving Hawaii, because it is very expensive there. But for me, I, had a budget of roughly 20 cents a day for food. And you might be thinking, Hyram, what the fuck does 20 cents a day buy you in food? Let me tell you, my friends, it buys you 1 packet of ramen noodle. And not like the luxury fancy ramen noodle cups that you can, pour hot water in. No, that was too expensive. Those were too nice. I'm talking about the ones that come in a square plastic baggie that are literally just sodium packed into noodle forms that you put with hot water and eat. I could afford to eat 1 of those per day. And then on the weekends, I would treat myself by getting $1.50 worth of Taco Bell on the weekends, just so I, didn't pass out during the week because of my complete lack of nutrition that I was getting from only eating ramen noodle. And what I would do is I would take that individual ramen noodle and split it in half and have 1 for breakfast and have 1 for dinner. And that's what I did for months, for a long time. So life was good. Yeah, it was rough. But at the time, I wasn't necessarily like totally miserable. I previously before that had been struggling with an eating disorder. So not to be too dark or anything, but I was like, oh my God, I can only afford a ramen noodle. Plus I'm losing weight. This is great, which is not healthy. And I had to do many years of therapy to correct that mindset. But at the time I wasn't like totally miserable, but I was definitely feeling a lot of stress and a lot of pressure because I was seeing my, money that I had to spend on things like food just drastically going down. And as I was looking towards future semesters, I was realizing more and more so, shit, I'm not going to be able to afford the semester after this. And I remember a pivotal moment that really changed everything for me is I had worked my ass off with my 3 jobs. I finally got a paycheck. I went to deposit my paycheck because rent was due the next day. I went to deposit my paycheck at my bank account, and I don't know what the fuck happened. I still don't know to this day what exactly happened, but I went to turn in my paycheck, and this is like right after I had been stressing so much about if I was going to be able to pay rent. I was so worried. I was just like, I don't know if I'm going to make it. I got my paycheck and I was like, yes, I'm going to be able to pay rent. This is amazing. I go to the bank to deposit it, and they were like, oh, you have a lot of charges on your account because your bank account was like violating some policy because I didn't pay like a certain fee. Again, I still don't know exactly what it was, but they were like, you can't continue using this bank account until you pay off these fees. And I was like, oh, well, how much is it in fees? And they said $600, which maybe you're listening and you might be thinking, oh, Hyram, that sucks, but that's not too bad. No, you don't understand. This was catastrophic for me. Like $600 was so much money, just completely beyond anything I could ever afford. And I walked out of that bank and walked to the beach and started bawling my eyes out. I was remember that moment, just sitting on the beach, bawling my eyes out. And I remember just realizing like, okay, I'm going to be homeless. I got to get, like a sleeping bag or something like that. Maybe someone can donate one to me, because I'm going to be living, I'll just sleep on the beach and then I can go to classes in between, sleeping on the beach. I didn't have a car or anything like that. So the best next option was the beach. And I was like, thank God I live in Hawaii because the weather's not too bad. So I can, be homeless without having to really worry about anything like super dangerous weather-wise. But I remember at that moment just being like, okay, I'm going to be homeless. Like, this is it. I'm out of money. There's nothing else I can do. Like, I'm done, The best thing I can do is just continue the rest of my classes. But even at that point, I started having kind of like a twinkling of a doubt as to whether or not I was going to continue with my college classes. Bless his heart. A really, really close friend in that moment, who I'm still very close with, came in and saved the day. And he was like, Hyram, I will pay for your rent. You can pay me back whenever. Have this money. I'm not going to let you sleep on the street. I'm not going to let you be homeless. Just take this money and you can pay me back whenever, like no timeline. And because of that moment, like that's literally one of the biggest reasons why this person is still in my life and why I love them so much, because that truly like saved me. And I was able to pay rent for another month, thankfully. And in that moment, I really remember thinking like, why am I doing this? Like, I enjoy college to a certain extent, but my passion for nonprofit work, my passion for entrepreneurship, creating a business, stuff like that, like, do those things necessarily need college degrees? Like, do I need a college degree? They had been ruminating like little thoughts. And I remember I was coming up on needing to pay for the next month of rent soon. And the tuition fees for college were also due soon as well. And I remember it was a Sunday and I was sitting in the library doing homework, and I was just sitting there thinking like, should I even still be here? Like, should I even still study? Is this worth it? Am I going to use this degree in the future? Why am I doing this to myself? Like, I'm absolutely miserable. I'm not going to have money for food next semester because I'm already surviving off of a single ramen and the good-natured spirit of people who would invite me out to eat and pay for my meal because they knew I couldn't afford it. Like, this is not how I want to be living. This is not healthy. It's definitely not sustainable. And like, do I even need this? And in that moment, it was less than 24 hours where the next day I canceled all my classes. I canceled I withdrew from school, didn't renew my contract for a new apartment and for the new month of rent, and immediately, I think that day, applied for 40 jobs in Honolulu and started looking for a place to live. And within the week, I had found a place to live. I had gotten accepted by a job, and boom, I was out of there. I was like out of my college town immediately. And it was wild. Like, it was such a fast switch going from spending years at a college, like grinding blood, sweat, and tears, putting my everything into my education and really believing in it, to just immediately dropping out and not really looking back, which was scary, but in the moment, it just kind of felt right. And I didn't know exactly why, but I remember being like, okay, this was a really rash decision, and that is not my style. I'm the type of person who will have a bunch of anxiety about any major life decision, and I'll think about it for months ahead of time before I actually make it. So this was very uncharacteristic of me, and I felt like I was kind of leaving that part of my life and all the work I had invested into that behind, which was a really big change. And I, moved to Honolulu. I started working as a makeup artist. before getting into skincare. And then I was also working as a server and just really grinding it out. And one of the things I want to talk about when it came to the experience of dropping out, because maybe for other people out there, you meditated a little bit more before dropping out, or it was kind of like a long-winded decision, as opposed to mine, which was completely just idiotic, some would say, to just immediately drop out like that. But at the same time, I really didn't have an option. Like, there really was no future for me in that. And all that was left for me was either drop out or get forcibly removed from my apartment and from the school because I'm no longer able to pay for anything. And when I moved into town, I was definitely a lot more comfortable. I was making a much better wage as far as like my hourly pay went. Granted, before I actually started working my job, you know how when you work a job, they don't pay you for like 2 weeks to a month? Whew, that was rough because I did not have any money, and that was another like kind of period of starvation because I was like, I don't have any money, and I just had to pay for rent for the new place that I'm moving into, which was like a tiny house that was way overfilled. Definitely over the legal limit. The house itself wasn't even legal because they packed too many people in there. It was like a whole thing. Okay, one of the things I wanted to talk about in the conversation around dropping out is that I think from a lot of posts I've seen online about like dropping out of school and it kind of being seen as like this new smart move and like only real entrepreneurs, don't go to college or drop out of college, and it's kind of triumphant, and it's this very like, well, I dropped out of college because I know what I want and I'm super cool, bro. That type of vibe, which, good for you if you feel that way, but that definitely was not my experience. When I dropped out of school, it felt like I was just completely throwing everything that I had worked on for the past however many years just down the drain. I felt like I was leaving all of my goals behind, all of my dreams to work in the nonprofit space, to, be really impactful on the world, to find a successful job, to be financially safe and comfortable. I felt like I was just leaving all of that behind. And it was pretty depressing for a little while. Okay, sorry guys, I had to take a break because in the middle of recording this, my phone died and I went to charge my phone and I laid down on the couch and it was around 6 p.m. when this happened. And all of a sudden I woke up at 3 a.m. not knowing what species I was, not even knowing where the fuck I was. I didn't know anything. I was like, what the hell happened? I just slept from 6 p.m. until 3 a.m. Anyway, it's the next morning. Hello everyone, sorry. Back to the conversation that I was having before. Yeah, in the aftermath of dropping out of college and when I was, working in Honolulu, it was really difficult to kind of like stay mentally strong throughout a lot of that because it felt like I was kind of starting from square one all over again. I went to a college preparatory charter school when I was in high school where the main focus was like, you have to go to college. There was AP classes where you got college credits. A lot of students were encouraged to pick up college classes on the side of when they were, taking their normal high school classes. And that was just a very strong emphasis, and especially from my community and my family as well. So in the aftermath of dropping out, it was hard not to feel very discouraged and very depressed about the fact that I essentially felt like a failure. And I will be honest, it wasn't something that was like overtaking me completely. Like, it wasn't something that I was crying about and like really thinking about 24/7 about how I was a failure and anything like that. And I think that's honestly just because I was so done with my experience for all the reasons that I explained before. I was tired of being super broke. I was tired of being in a, religiously dominant environment. And so, making that move was definitely beneficial. And I saw that there were so many benefits to not having to be in that environment before. But at the same time, I was like, well, shit, I'm starting from square one, not having a degree, it will basically prevent me from getting into a lot of careers, and no one's really going to care about if you have a partially finished degree, And I had also tried transferring to Manoa, University of Hawaii, Manoa, but unfortunately, and this was really stupid and it made me very frustrated, but out of the 31 credits I had, only 2 credits transferred. So I was like, okay, if I'm going to even try to transfer to another school, I'm going to have to start from square one, and I'm going to have to even pay more money. So there's just no way I can continue this. And so as I was, working in Honolulu, it was just something that was hard not to think about all the time. And I think that's maybe something that isn't talked about as much when it comes to the conversation around dropping out, because it is kind of seen as like this triumphant, rebellious act. And, once someone drops out, then that's when they see success, and that's when they're able to like move forward and progress. But it doesn't feel like that in the moment, because after dropping out, I was like, okay, I have my bases covered. I'm making my money from, working my jobs. But besides that, I feel like there's really no future for me. I don't know what the fuck to do. Like, I was very directionless for a period of my life, and it was difficult, Thankfully, I was in an environment in Honolulu and had a really good friend group and support system that worked, like similar jobs as me. And I was able to really understand the value of just, not having to be so hyper fixated and hyper focused on what is my career and what is my future and how am I building this successful path for myself and blah, 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 blah. Because, having been raised in an environment where that was the dominant conversation, it felt like if I wasn't doing anything for my long-term career, then what the fuck is even the point? But moving to Honolulu helped me realize that you can have a very fine, good, content life by, just working as a server, working as a makeup artist, not having to think about like long-term career. And it helped me find the value in those type of jobs. Granted, I didn't necessarily love my jobs, and I didn't necessarily love my life at the time. I definitely was experiencing a lot of depression for a bunch of different reasons. Part of it being the fact that I dropped out, but it was also a much needed paradigm shift for me, I think, where I didn't need to be so focused on the long term, and I could, try and find moments of joy in, doing jobs that I hadn't necessarily planned on doing, and working in jobs that weren't necessarily going to equate to long-term careers. So I think the interesting thing when it comes to kind of my experience with dropping out as well, which when I look back, I'm like, oh, this is really cool. But in the moment, it kind of was really shitty. Had I continued pursuing my college education, I would have never started a YouTube channel. I don't believe, well, that's a lie. I had started a YouTube channel, but I tried starting like a makeup channel at first, and I did not enjoy that whatsoever. And I don't believe I would have pursued making skincare content, and I definitely would not have taken it seriously like I have over the past few years. But yeah, had I continued on with my education, I wouldn't have started my YouTube channel. I wouldn't have had this absolutely incredible opportunity to be able to create content online and just enjoy and love the experience so much. Had I gotten my degree, I probably would have, to be honest, been in a corporate job that I probably would have not liked at all. I mean, I want to be optimistic and say that I would have been like trying to change the world in some major way. But to be honest, with kind of the opportunities that were laid out for me and other students who I, was in school with, that's probably where I would have ended up. And I don't know that I would have been happy had I done that. And that's not saying that right now I'm the epitome of happiness. Everything is amazing mentally, and this is so great. Like, I definitely have my fair share of mental health struggles, but I'm definitely way happier in this position, being able to do this as my job and connect with you guys online and be a part of this wonderful community than I ever would have been working a corporate job, because that's just not my vibe. And I will say, I am not the person who likes to be in a very structured work environment where I am being told what to do. I think it's my Taurus and Aries combination at play, where it's just like, do not tell me what to do. I will do my own thing. Don't get in my way. And I think that's why this job works for me so well, because I am able to take it at my own pace and be able to make decisions that I want to make rather than having to do whatever someone else is mandating me to do. So looking back, I'm like, oh my God, I am so grateful that I dropped out. Like, that really was the universe at play. That was totally meant to happen. And even though in that moment it seemed like, holy shit, I'm turning my back on everything I've worked for and I'm kind of throwing my life away, and what the fuck am I doing? now I look back and I'm like, wow, that definitely was meant to happen, because after I dropped out, that's when I started working my jobs, and that's when I started working as a makeup artist and really developed like an intense passion and interest in skincare and started working in the skincare space. And then of course, started making YouTube videos with the extra time that I had in addition to the jobs that I was working. So I'm really grateful that it ended up happening, and I'm very happy to say that dropping out was one of the best decisions I ever made, and I'm really, really grateful for it. But I do want to say that I'm not necessarily one of these people that's like, that you see on like these like entrepreneurship, like motivational type accounts where they're like, oh shoot, I just kicked the camera. Where they're like, you don't need to go to college. Traditional education is bullshit. Like, that's just what sheep do. And you're not a sheep. You're an entrepreneur. Like, that's definitely not my vibe. And I kind of wanted to share what my overall opinion is on traditional education, having experienced it and having dropped out and experienced, a really good career path that isn't related to a college education at all. And overall, my thoughts are pretty mixed. I will say I don't agree with the mindset that is present, I think, within so many family structures and the pressure that parents and communities place on children to get college degrees. I think that's really stupid, because I think college is something that is very structured and caters to only one form of learning. And that's something that I really personally struggled with. I'm not sure if it's my ADHD or if it's just the way my brain is structured, but I do not thrive in environments that prioritize auditory learning, that prioritize non-applicable homework. And what I mean by that, like, is just like filling out papers and, doing homework sheets and submissions. Like, I was all about like, if I have homework, like, make it real life homework, something that I can do in real life. And I think that's why I enjoyed entrepreneurship so much, because our homework was like, okay, go build a business. And I was able to, do that from scratch and learn through real world application. But most of the time within college structures, that's not how it works at all. And it's just a lot of papers, a lot of homework that feels really stupid in the morning, in the moment. And it just, caters to only that one specific type of learning. Like, I am a kinesthetic learner. I learn by working with my hands, through touch, through experience, through actually going through whatever it is that will teach me what I need to know, as opposed to lectures. Like, oh my fucking God, I hate lectures so much. And props to you if you're someone who can learn from lectures. But I think the majority of people out there in the world do not learn by lectures. And that's really the only thing that is prioritized within college learning. And I think that's very limited in terms of scope and realisticness when looking at the general population and how the majority of people learn. And that's why I think like college is definitely not for everyone. I think there is certain career paths where a college degree is absolutely important and mandatory. Like if you work in the healthcare system, I hope to God that you are going to college and, getting that type of learning. Specialized education where it would require more intensive courses or graduate school or things like that. Obviously, I think college is a necessary and wonderful thing. But if you're like me, someone who's an entrepreneur, someone who wants to work in business, someone who wants to work within fields that, don't necessarily need a degree in hand for you to work in, then I don't think that college is necessary. And in my opinion, it's a big waste of money. I think there's a lot of benefits to going to college. Like the social aspect, in my opinion, is the biggest part of it. Social aspect and networking opportunities. I think, being able to connect with professors and like, for example, in the business world, you get to connect with other entrepreneurs. And I, was a part of entrepreneurship competitions where we would travel around and present about social impact programs that we had started up. And it offered a lot of amazing networking opportunities and, being able to connect with other students and real world learning of, being out on your own. I think there are some valuable lessons there, but for the price, I'm just like, is it worth it though? And a lot of these real world learnings and networking opportunities you can totally find not having to go to school, not having to go to college. And, if you're someone who is financially supported by your parents to go to college, or you are in a good financial positioning, whatever that may be, then, hey, good for you. I think college can be a great opportunity, and definitely give you a few years to kind of figure out what you want to do and be in a learning environment. But if you're someone who, like me, did not have a lot of money at all and really had to struggle in order to go to college, I look back at my college years and I'm like, I did not need that. Like, I'm grateful for it. I was able to, learn some valuable lessons, but nothing really that I wouldn't have been able to learn by just going off into the real world and starting, working and developing my side passions outside of my typical work hours, So I don't know. I don't think it's absolutely necessary for everyone. And I know that that's not necessarily a revolutionary idea now, because like I was saying before, there are a lot of people and, pages and accounts who are kind of promoting the idea that you don't need to go to college to be successful. You don't need to go to school. So it's definitely not a revolutionary idea, but sometimes I get a little bit concerned around the conversation and the narrative that is happening around why you should drop out. And this is specifically in regard to creators and influencers, or people who don't necessarily have a long-term vision and financial way to support themselves before making the decision to drop out. And let me explain what I mean. I, when I dropped out, I definitely did it the dumb way. So I do not recommend doing it the way I did, because making that decision in less than 24 hours is not a good idea. And that's why I say I think the universe was at play. But the majority of the time, I feel like if you are making the decision to drop out, have a very clear plan in place for not only what you want your life to be in the future and how you're going to get to those goals, but also have a job in place, a living situation in place. Like, make sure you have those things covered and set before you make the decision to drop out, because I know it can sound exciting to just kind of like the rush of the moment, just be like, fuck this place, I'm out, but I'm like, if you don't have that stuff set up, then that's going to be really difficult for you. So have a plan in place. And I know for me, my long-term plan was definitely like, I would love to be an entrepreneur. I would love to work within the social impact space. I would love to make a difference. And do I need a degree for that? No, I don't, And so that was really my long-term vision that I stuck to. And in relation to like creators and influencers dropping out, because I have seen a lot of people heavily criticize the notion of creators and people online dropping out of college because they start seeing the online money roll in and they're like, fuck this place, I'm going to go after the money. Obviously, I'm someone who has dropped out, so my opinion is a little bit biased, but I think honestly the same type of advice applies for creators out there. And let me know what your guys' opinions are, because I'm genuinely interested to hear like what you guys think. But I know sometimes creators will prematurely make the decision to drop out, quit their job, abandon whatever, financial income they're getting because they start making a little bit of money. I've heard horror stories from content creators where, they got, I don't know, it's like $50,000. And so they decided to quit their job. They dropped out, they bought a new car, and were essentially living month to month as a creator. And even though their monthly payment was pretty high, they were just like, it's fine because I'm making enough money. I'll be making enough of this money in the future. I can spend, if I'm making like, I don't know, like $10,000 a month, I can spend like $9,000 a month, and I'll be good. But the reality is, when it comes to the online space, is like, and kind of any industry, to be honest, is that it is very up and down. You'll go through high moments, low moments, and you really can't count on getting the same amount of income every month, especially for the rest of your life, because it's the internet. Who knows what it's going to look like in 10, 20 years, And for a lot of these creators, they've ended up having to go back to whatever jobs they were working before, say after only a year of being online, because they were spending over what was smart. They weren't saving the money, they weren't investing the money, and were just kind of going with the moment. And I think the problem with dropping out is that can fuck you over even more, because not only are you kind of abandoning whatever job you may have had at the time, but you're potentially abandoning your future career. And sometimes jobs are not very forgiving if they see that you know, dropped out of college, didn't go to college for like a few years, and then all of a sudden wanted to go back. Your college may not accept you back. Your credits may not transfer. You may have a difficult time getting a job. It's something that you should definitely, I think, be very sure about and be very intent on knowing you're going to build in the future, and make smart financial decisions about it too. And that goes for everyone, not just creators. Like if you are someone who's considering dropping out of school, make sure that you are not overspending, that you are, you know, wisely using your money, that you are making sure whatever money you are making goes obviously towards basic living expenses, but that you're also putting it into whatever projects or whatever businesses or things that will help you advance kind of within your future career, and not just kind of spending the money and living in the moment. That would just be my biggest recommendation, because, you know, I feel like everyone, I mean, I know for me, I can only speak for me at the end of the day, but I personally would not want to be in a job or financial situation 20 years down the road where I'm living paycheck to paycheck. I'm having to worry about, you know, the possibility of medical expenses or emergencies or different things like that, because I randomly decided to drop out one day, you know? And I'm definitely not the most intelligent when it comes to like finances. Like I am not like a genius investor, super meticulous about everything, but I've always been very smart with my money and always lived very minimally in comparison to what I am making, because maybe it's, you know, the trauma from growing up, but and the experience of almost being homeless, but I'm always having through my mind every day, just like, what if shit hits the fan? What if everything goes wrong? What if it all comes crumbling down? Which also isn't the best mentality to have, I guess, but I think it's good to be smart about that. And, you know, and really analyze, like, does dropping out align with your future goals, and does it align with your preparedness and your willingness to work and compensate for whatever opportunities you are missing out on because you're dropping out? Or is it just smarter to stay in school? And that decision is really up to you. I know for me, definitely was not a good decision. I'm so glad I dropped out. I would have been in so much more debt. I would have hated my life. I would have just been absolutely miserable, and I probably would have ended up in a job that I really didn't enjoy and really didn't like. So I'm very grateful that I made the decision I did. But I think just in general with everyone, I think when it comes to the conversation around dropping out and leaving college, be careful, really think about it, be very considerate, analyze all the options and the routes and the different things that you could do instead. But also don't cave to pressure from your parents, to pressure from your family or community, because I truly believe that like college is not for everyone, and college is, at least in the USA, is a luxury. It's one of the most like luxurious things I think we'll ever pay for. It's very fancy, you know, and it's definitely not for everyone. And you don't need to feel that pressure just because that's kind of what's expected of you, or because you're like, well, I want to have a good paying job, so I guess I have to go to college. Not the case whatsoever. There are so many jobs, and increasingly more and more so, tech companies and corporate companies are hiring people who don't have a college degree, because what matters more so is like your work ethic, your side projects and side passions you've been building, what you've been doing with your free time. Like that's exemplifying as much more impressive to a lot of employers than a piece of paper with a degree, you know? It really just depends, obviously, depends on the industries, but that would be kind of like my overall thoughts and recommendations as someone who did drop out in a very stupid way. That's honestly what I would say, but I am curious to hear you guys' thoughts. Like, please comment or feel free to message me on Instagram, like what your experience or what your overall opinions are. I'm kind of like in the middle, I would say, but you know, I'm interested to hear what you guys think. And if you have any kind of contrasting opinions, feel free to let me know. Thanks for listening to this story. I had fun sharing it. It's one that, you know, in the moment when I was experiencing it was very embarrassing and not something I likely would have been sharing. But now I feel like a little bit more comfortable because it's been so long. And honestly, looking at my life in totality, I'm like, oh, there's a reason that happened. And that's also a big recommendation I have is go with your gut, go with what the universe is telling you. Maybe that's hard to interpret. I understand, but if your gut is telling you, this is the right decision to make and that decision is dropping out and you've analyzed the options and you feel like you're good, then do it. Fuck it. Just do it. I know it really benefited me, but make sure you're intelligent about it. Make sure that you're really thinking it out and don't do anything rash or just out of the blue, That's my overall thoughts. Thank you guys so much for listening. Make sure you subscribe to the Justaposition YouTube channel if you haven't already. This has been a production of Ramble, a Cadence 13 studio. New episodes out every Thursday, and I will see you guys in the next episode. Mwah.